Imagine opening your banking app on a random Tuesday morning. You're not expecting anything special, just checking if your paycheck landed. Maybe you already know the number by heart. Maybe you avoid looking at it too closely. But then something strange happens. For a split second, you don't think about what you earned. You think about what would happen if everything stopped tomorrow. No paycheck, no overtime, no side income, just life continuing at full speed while your income suddenly disappears. And in that moment, a question appears that most people try to avoid. How long could I actually survive financially right now? Not in theory, not in hopes, but in real numbers. Days, weeks, maybe a couple of months if you're careful. For many Americans, the answer is uncomfortable. And what makes it even more surprising is this. It's not just people who are struggling. It includes people with good jobs, stable careers, even people who look financially fine from the outside. Because the average person's money situation in America isn't what most people assume. It's something far more fragile and far more psychological. And once you see the real picture, you start to realize something unsettling. It's not just about income. It's about behavior, pressure, and invisible financial habits that almost nobody talks about. To understand what the average person's money stats really look like, you have to start with a simple truth. Most people are not broke because they don't earn money. They are broke because their money never gets the chance to sit still. It moves the moment it arrives. Rent, car payments, credit cards, subscriptions, food delivery, unexpected expenses that don't feel unexpected anymore because they happen every single month. And what's left is not a financial cushion. It's a financial tightrope. But here's where the psychology becomes interesting. Most people don't experience this as financial danger. They experience it as normal life. Because when everyone around you is living the same way, instability stops feeling like instability. It starts feeling like reality. And this is where the average money story in America begins to shift from numbers into behavior. Think about the typical financial pattern. A paycheck comes in. There's a brief sense of relief, maybe even a small emotional reward. I can finally breathe again. But that feeling doesn't last long because the money already has destinations assigned to it. Before it even hits the account, it's mentally spent. This is what behavioral economists call pre-allocation thinking. Money is not experienced as freedom. It is experienced as obligations. And when money becomes obligation, people stop seeing financial opportunity. They start seeing financial pressure. So even when income increases, something strange happens. Life expands to match it. A slightly better apartment, a slightly newer car, a slightly more comfortable lifestyle that quietly consumes the extra income. This is lifestyle inflation, but most people don't experience it as a decision. They experience it as finally being able to live normally. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because you don't fight something that feels normal. But the real problem goes deeper than spending habits. It shows up in the data of how people actually hold money. Across the United States, financial reports consistently show a similar pattern. A large portion of households have very limited emergency savings. Not zero, not necessarily negative, but often not enough to cover more than a small unexpected expense without stress. A car repair, a medical bill, a short gap in income. And suddenly, stability turns into negotiation. Do I pay this now or later? Do I use credit or delay something else? Do I move money from one urgent problem to another? This is the hidden reality of the average financial life. It's not chaos. It's constant prioritization under pressure. And over time, that pressure shapes decision-making. Because when every financial choice feels urgent, long-term thinking becomes harder to access. Not because people don't care, but because the brain prioritizes survival before strategy. This is where psychology quietly takes control. When financial stress is constant, the mind adapts. It starts optimizing for short-term relief instead of long-term growth. That's why small luxuries become important. A meal out after a stressful week. A purchase that feels like a reward. A subscription that simplifies life just a little. Individually, none of these decisions seem significant. But together, they create a system where money is constantly reset back to zero emotional distance. There is no separation between income and lifestyle. Everything blends into one continuous cycle. Earn, spend, recover, repeat. And because the cycle feels normal, it rarely gets questioned. But here's what makes the average money situation even more complex. People don't compare themselves to statistics. They compare themselves to visibility. Social media doesn't show median households. It shows extremes. The upgraded apartments, the new cars, the travel, the purchases that signal success. So even when someone is financially average, or even slightly above average, they can still feel behind. Because perception reshapes expectation, and expectation reshapes spending. This is one of the most powerful financial pressures in modern life. Not bills, not taxes, but comparison. Comparison creates invisible upgrades, and invisible upgrades create financial strain that doesn't look like strain from the outside. Now step back and look at the full picture. The average person's money situation is not defined by one thing. It's defined by a system of interacting pressures. Income that feels busy instead of abundant. Expenses that feel permanent instead of flexible. Savings that exist but don't feel strong enough to rely on. And a constant psychological background noise of comparison and expectation. But what's most important is this. Most people are not making irrational financial decisions. They are making adaptive ones. They are adapting to their environment, their income level, their social circle, and their mental model of what life is supposed to cost. And that's why changing finances is not just about earning more. It's about changing the internal definition of normal. Because once someone begins to see their financial behavior clearly, a shift becomes possible. Not an overnight transformation, but a gradual separation between income and lifestyle. A moment where extra money doesn't immediately disappear into upgrades. It starts sitting, observing, accumulating. And at first that feels uncomfortable. Because unused money feels like missed opportunity when you're used to spending everything. But over time, something changes. Money stops being just a flow. It becomes a tool. And tools require distance to be useful. There is a quiet difference between people who stay financially stuck and people who gradually build stability. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's the ability to delay emotional spending long enough for money to turn into options. Options are what most people are actually chasing when they think about being rich. Freedom to leave a job. Freedom to handle emergencies. Freedom to make decisions without immediate financial pressure. But those freedoms don't appear instantly. They are built in the space between income and impulse. And this is where the average money story becomes personal. Because almost everyone starts in the same place. Income comes in. Life takes it. Nothing is left. Then life gets slightly more expensive. And the cycle continues. But at some point, a different question becomes possible. Not how much do I earn, but how much of what I earn actually survives my lifestyle? That single shift in question changes everything. Because it moves attention away from income and toward retention. And retention is where wealth begins. The most misunderstood part of money in America is this. People assume wealth is created by earning more. But in reality, wealth is created by keeping more of what already comes in. That doesn't require extreme income. It requires structural change in behavior. A pause between earning and spending. A gap where money is allowed to accumulate identity beyond just survival. So when you look again at what the average person's money stats really look like, it's not just a set of numbers. It's a reflection of modern life itself. Fast expenses, constant upgrades, invisible pressure, and very little space for money to rest long enough to grow. But understanding this is where the shift begins. Because once you see the system clearly, you stop believing it's fixed. And you start realizing something important. The difference between financial stress and financial stability is not always income. Sometimes, it's just the ability to slow the cycle down long enough for money to finally start working for you instead of constantly disappearing from you.